cover the whole.
I love the president. I think he's done a terrific job up to now. This could turn everything the other way. Whoever advised him on this ought to be reprimanded. In all honesty, it's not going to help America. It's going to cause higher prices around here, and it's going to make us less competitive.
Well, a day after shocking Republicans on gun policy, President Trump just did the same thing on trade, and he caught Congress, Wall Street, and even those that work for him in the White House completely off guard. Meanwhile, the administration is shedding staffers with more resignations reportedly on the way. And of course, the word of the day is chaos, featured in headlines and lead stories across the morning papers. Jeb Bush, the guy I said from the beginning I was voting for good reason, he has to be thinking, I told you so. Watch this.
Donald, is great at the one-liners, but he's a chaos candidate, and he'd be a chaos president.
Yeah, well, that ended up being right. And as I said many times before, Jeb would have actually been a good president. We could use one of those right now. Welcome to Morning Joe. It's Friday, March the 2nd. Mika's going to be back on Monday. Willie, who's with us this morning?
Joe, it's an extraordinary morning already. The president's up tweeting saying that trade wars are good, defending the tariffs he wants to put on steel and aluminum, that he will put on steel and aluminum next week. We're going to talk about it all with national affairs analyst for NBC News and MSNBC, John Heilman. Our buddy Donnie Deutsch is here, and the Washington anchor for BBC World News America, Caddy K. So, Joe, he says trade wars are good. Not only that, they're also easy to win, making the case, despite what most experts say, despite what Gary Cohn in his own administration says. He says they're good.
Well, yes. I mean, there's a long tradition of this in the Republican Party. You, of course, the last who believed this was Herbert Hoover. That didn't turn out really well for it did not turn out really well. Deepened the Depression, made things much worse. Now, this is actually Donald Trump. I guess the populist, but this is, as John Podhoretz wrote in the New York Post today, that this is an itch of an ignorant economic belief of Donald Trump's that he's held since the early 1980s. So Orrin Hatch, when he says, well, whoever's advising the great Donald Trump should be reprimanded or maybe lose their job. Well, it's Donald Trump who's advising Donald Trump, as always. And Donald Trump has believed this consistently for over 4 decades. And John Heilman, but the cynic in me, and a friend repeated this to me last night, and I've been thinking about it all day. The cynic in me just has to believe that this was one of those things that Donald Trump had in case of emergencies, to break the glass, like that morning that FBI agents went through Paul Manafort's front door and suddenly it was talking about transgender rights in the military and shocked everybody. Of course, nothing ever came of that. So he doesn't talk to anybody. We hear reports that he's angry and he's bouncing around the White House and he's raging about chaos, and then suddenly he starts rambling on about this, springs it on everybody the next morning, and sure enough, we didn't talk about Manafort's indictment. We didn't talk as much about Hope Hicks late yesterday afternoon. People are looking at a collapsing stock market and looking at this economic policy that no one in their right mind supports. I wonder if this was another head bob.
Well, I mean, look, there's a little bit right now of a kind of madman at the wheel quality here in the White House where, and I know we're going to talk about it probably all morning, the degree of chaos, as you suggested, Joe, in a chaotic candidate who became a chaotic president is now, we're kind of at peak chaos right now. And
advisors, people close to the president, titans of industry, key Republicans, in fact, basically the entire Republican orthodoxy are against this. And it could bring a host of negative consequences. Traditional, conventional wisdom is that tariffs are bad for the U.S. economy. The Wall Street Journal editorial board slamming this as Trump's biggest policy blunder that will punish American workers, invite retaliation that will harm U.S. exports, divide his political coalition at home, anger allies abroad, and undermine his tax and regulatory reforms. If you drive a car, fly, drink a can of beer, prices could go up. Anything made with steel or aluminum will become more expensive. Companies would raise prices or cut jobs. In fact, a beer industry group predicts this will cost 20,000 jobs. Now, it's not clear if these tariffs will exempt key U.S. allies, so experts think this could spark retaliation, especially from China. Farmers in particular worry it could slap tariffs on soy. China is the top client for U.S. soy. But that damage is all still theoretical. Global stocks are already down very sharply. Asian and European markets falling overnight, down about, there you see, that's the Dow there. Trump's announcement sent the Dow down 420 points. The NASDAQ and S&P 500 fell 1.3%. Shares of plane and car makers were especially hit hard. Boeing, GM, Ford. Investors do not like uncertainty, and I got to be honest with you, there's a lot of uncertainty about exactly what is the plan here.
Yeah, and just from a process standpoint, it was surprising, right? Because no one knew this was going to happen yesterday, and the way he shocked his own administration. Republican reaction, just a quick sampling. Ben Sass from Nebraska, you'd expect a policy this bad from a leftist administration, not a supposedly Republican one. And Mike Lee calling it a huge job-killing tax hike. Just a few of the Republicans weighing in, but the president's tariff talk drawing condemnation from U.S. trading partners around the world as well. The president of the European Commission denouncing the move as blatant intervention to protect American industries. In just the last few hours, China weighing in as well. Let's go live to Beijing and bring in CNN's Matt Rivers. Good morning to you, Matt. What's happening overseas? What's the reaction?
Well, China has weighed in. We're interested in two kinds of China reaction, right? What they said today, but also what's going to happen down the road. So we'll get to that in a second. But today, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs basically slammed this ruling or this proposal from the president, saying it doesn't help, saying it will hurt global trade, saying it will put a dent in U.S.-Chinese relations. And that's not surprising. That's what we've heard from the Chinese government anytime they are asked about potential U.S. protectionist-style policies. But you heard Christine get into that a little while ago. It's what's going to happen down the road. How, if any way, does China retaliate here? And they have a lot of tools in their toolkit to hurt American companies. So you heard Christine talk about soy, for example. Billions and billions and billions of dollars of American soy is bought by Chinese buyers every single year. It's one of the biggest American exports to China. If China decides, hey, we're going to buy soy from Argentina or Brazil instead, that will have an effect on the tens of thousands of U.S. jobs supported by the soy industry. And by the way, most of those jobs are in states that voted for Donald Trump in 2016. The Chinese government knows that. They know where to apply political pressure points, so maybe that's one avenue they could take. The other thing they could look at, airplanes, for example. They buy a ton of aircraft from Boeing. Could they restrict market access there? So the Chinese government has a lot of different ways to retaliate. It knows it can hurt U.S. businesses, U.S. jobs. The question is, will it do that? Only time will tell, but that's something we're going to be watching very closely.
Interesting, Matt, because China, of course, is not even in the top 10 of U.S. steel imports. It is 11th on that list, and yet this policy appears aimed at China. We'll check back with you later in the program. Matt, thanks.
All right, the NRA claims it has the president on its side. After huddling at the White House last night with the president and the vice president, the head of the NRA's lobbying arm, Chris Cox, tweeting a blunt message after that meeting, insisting both men oppose gun control. Asked if the White House agrees with Cox's statement, a senior official would only say the president, quote, believes in the Second Amendment.
Last night's meeting with the NRA follows Mr. Trump's freewheeling meeting with a bipartisan group of lawmakers to discuss gun reforms. A lawmaker at that meeting, Florida Congressman and Army vet Brian Mast, still believes the president will take action.
He said very clearly that if we get him a bill that addresses bump stocks, background checks, and buying age, that he's going to sign it.
The NRA met tonight with the president and the vice president. Do you think the president may tack back to his original positions, which were more in line with the NRA positions?
I certainly hope not. You know, he's had a great deal of strength in this issue, you know, telling all the other lawmakers, look, you got to be strong in this. You can't be afraid. You got to go with your gut. You got to do what you think is right. You can't say that and then walk away from that.
Many of the president's suggestions at that meeting, that bipartisan meeting, were more in line with Democratic positions. Now, with officials scrambling, sources say the rollout of new measures to curb gun violence will not be released today as planned. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says the Senate will take up a banking bill next week, dashing hopes of quick action on guns in the wake of the school shooting in Florida. And remember, the president said there were a lot of common sense things that could be done that he personally would do. He would write out bump stocks. He said we should raise the age of buying a weapon to 21. He said that people who are mentally ill, they should have their guns taken away before there is due process. He was very specific, the president was, on his plans. He huddled with the NRA. maybe those ideas went away. Chances are you're happy it's Friday. I am. Now imagine how happy you'd be if you worked at the White House. The Trump administration is struggling to turn a corner after a chaotic week. CNN has learned National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster is set to leave by the end of the month. The West Wing is denying his departure is coming soon, but multiple sources say it is likely McMaster will retire as a three-star general instead of returning to the military. Two sources say McMaster has spoken to top officials at the Hoover Institution about a job there.
Sources also telling CNN one of Ivanka Trump's international business deals is under scrutiny from U.S. counterintelligence officials. The FBI looking into Trump International Hotel and Tower in Vancouver. It's one of the few Trump-branded properties to open since the president took office, so the timing of negotiations and, most importantly, financing for the deal could be of special interest. FBI attention could create a hurdle for Ivanka as she tries to obtain permanent security clearance.
A spokesman for the First Daughter's Ethics Council claims no red flag or problem has been raised with her clearance application. This on the heels of reports several countries discussed ways to use Jared Kushner's business deals to manipulate him, and that his family real estate business got $500 million in loans after lenders met with Kushner at the White House.
Another sign of turmoil, CNN has learned the president was fuming after Attorney General Jeff Sessions pushed back against him with a statement defending his own integrity and honor. It was a rare gesture of defiance after the president called Sessions disgraceful in his latest Twitter tirade and asked about Sessions. Press Secretary Sarah Sanders did not exactly give a ringing endorsement here.
Does the president want to get rid of his attorney general? Not that I know of.
After nearly a week of this drama, White House Chief of Staff John Kelly vented a little at a Homeland Security event.
I miss every one of you every day. I went. Truly, at 6 months, the last thing I wanted to do was walk away from one of the great honors of my life, being the Secretary of Homeland Security. But I did something wrong, and God punished me, I guess.
Just a joke. Trump allies in Washington describe a feeling of meltdown at the White House. They say the president wants to do something to turn the tide, but it is not exactly clear what that would be.
The U.S. is looking for a new ambassador to Mexico. Roberta Jacobson announcing she is stepping down in May in search of other opportunities. Jacobson is a seasoned diplomat who was nominated to the position in 2015 by then-President Barack Obama. Now, relations with Mexico have been strained over trade and the border wall. Jacobson ending her announcement written in Spanish by declaring, "Juntos somos más fuertes." We are stronger together. Last weekend, Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto called off an official trip to Washington after a tense phone call with the president. Ahead, U.S. officials say they're skeptical about Vladimir Putin's claim to have a missile so powerful it can...
He's got some weapons that I think our Department of Defense knew he was developing, all right? And some of them maybe, as he suggested, further along than others. But I don't think any of them, even if they were fully operational, changes the strategic equation, the strategic balance between us and the Russians.
That's former CIA and NSA Director General Michael Hayden. He and several other intelligence experts expressing skepticism about Vladimir Putin's claims of resurgent Russian military might. One U.S. official calling Putin's announcement, quote, cheesy, insisting U.S. defense and military capabilities remain second to none.
The Russian leader claiming his country has developed invincible nuclear weapon systems with unlimited range, can't be tracked. Mr. Putin's address featuring video clips of nuclear warheads hitting Florida, the site of President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. Top U.S. officials unamused, also unconvinced. Let's go live to Moscow, bring in CNN's Matthew Chance. And Matthew, frankly, this was meant for his domestic audience, right? I mean, he's trying to build up the narrative of his own military, just as in the United States. Donald Trump, the president here, is talking about the American military.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was the primary audience for this speech, which was made at the joint house of the Russian parliament here in Moscow, was domestic. He is in a political season here. Vladimir Putin, in just 16 days from now, he's facing re-election. He's certain to win that election, hands down, but he still wants to take these opportunities to project himself as a strong president, a strong leader who's very mindful of the Russian military, rather, and who has national security on his mind, much as you say, President Trump likes to present himself as well. But undoubtedly, he was also messaging the West and his adversaries in the United States. I don't think it's a coincidence that Florida was chosen as the hypothetical potential target for these new invincible missiles that he was showing in that computer computer sort of generated display thing that he put out. But at the same time, again, messaging the West, yes, but this was a political speech first and foremost, a chest-thumping political speech here in Moscow.
Is there any suggestion that there is actually science and technology behind these missiles, that they exist?
Well, those doubts that have been raised in the US have not been raised here. People tend to take at face value what the president says, I think, to a larger extent. And of course, there's no doubt in this country that they are working behind the scenes to develop new technologies to try and get one up on their adversaries. The criticism that's been raised here, which I think is interesting, is that why is Russia, why is the president projecting itself as this threat to the West at a time when it should be focusing on the economy and trying to attract foreign investment? This could backfire, is the criticism I've seen in the Russian press about this speech.
All right, Matthew Chance, thank you so much for that. The President of the United States not tweeting on this. He tweets about North Korea and its threats often, but nothing from the president on this.
Not yet. All right, ahead, a very ugly day for millions along the East Coast. Rain, dangerous wind, snow, possible flooding, flight cancellations already building up. A nor'easter forecast is next.
Worth of American soybeans are purchased by Chinese buyers each year. That supports tens of thousands of jobs in the United States. The Chinese government knows that. They know that most of those jobs are in states that make up Trump's base. 8 of the top 10 exporting states for soybean in 2016 voted for Donald Trump. The Chinese government knows that. Do they restrict access to those farmers to this market? They could do that. They could also focus on the company like Boeing, the Chinese aviation market growing faster than any other in the world. They could focus on Boeing and restrict market access there. They've got a lot of tools in their toolkit to be able to hurt U.S. business. The question is, how will they do that, if at all?
Matt Rivers live for us in Beijing. Thank you. Pat Roberts, meanwhile, he's the chairman of the Senate Agricultural Committee, says this is terribly counterproductive. I'm not very happy. Elsewhere, the NRA claims it has the president on its side after huddling at the White House last night with the president and vice president. The head of the NRA's lobbying arm, Chris Cox, tweeting a blunt message afterward insisting both men oppose gun control. Asked if the White House agrees with Cox's assessment, a senior official would only say the president, quote, believes in the Second Amendment.
Wow, it's a real spotlight on the access the NRA has to the Oval Office, too, right? Two big meetings in less than a week. Last night's meeting with the NRA follows Mr. Trump's freewheeling meeting with a bipartisan group of lawmakers to discuss gun reform. A lawmaker at that meeting, Florida Congressman and Army vet Brian Mast, still believes the president will take action on gun violence.
He said very clearly that if we get him a bill that addresses bump stocks, background checks, and buying age, that he's going to sign it.
The NRA met tonight with the president and the vice president. Do you think the president may tack back to his original positions, which were more in line with the NRA positions?
I certainly hope not. He's had a great deal of strength in this issue, telling all the other lawmakers, look, you got to be strong in this. You can't be afraid. You got to go with your gut. You got to do what you think is right. You can't say that and then walk away from that.
Does appear to be where this is headed, though. Many of the president's suggestions at the meeting were more in line with Democratic positions, in fact, to the left of them. Now, with officials scrambling, sources say the rollout of new measures to curb gun violence will not be released today as planned. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says the Senate will take up a banking bill next week, dashing hopes of quick action on guns in the wake of the school shooting in Florida. Chances are you're happy it's Friday. Now, imagine if you'd be working at the White House. Well, certainly you would be then. The Trump administration struggling to turn a corner after a chaotic week. CNN's learned National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster set to leave by the end of the month. The West Wing is denying his departure is imminent, but multiple sources say it's likely McMaster will retire as a 3-star general instead of returning to the military. 2 sources say McMaster has spoken to top officials at the Hoover Institution about a job there.
Sources also telling CNN one of Ivanka Trump's international business deals is now under scrutiny from U.S. counterintelligence officials. The FBI looking into Trump International Hotel and Tower in Vancouver. It is one of the few Trump-branded properties to open since the president took office. The timing of negotiations, the timing of financing for this deal could be of special interest. FBI attention could create a hurdle for Ivanka as she tries to obtain a permanent security clearance.
Spokesman for the First Daughter's Ethics Council claims no red flag or problem has been raised with her clearance application. This on the heels of reports several countries discuss ways to use Jared Kushner's business deals to manipulate him, and that his family real estate business got $500 million in loans after lenders met with Kushner at the White House.
CNN has also learned the president was fuming after Attorney General Jeff Sessions pushed back against him. Remember, a rare gesture of defiance from the Attorney General after the president called Sessions disgraceful in his latest Twitter tirade. Asked about Sessions, Press Secretary Sarah Sanders did not exactly give a ringing endorsement.
Does the president want to get rid of his Attorney General? Not that I know of.
That was brief. After nearly a week of this drama, White House Chief of Staff John Kelly vented a little bit at a Homeland Security event.
I miss every one of you every day. I went. Truly, at 6 months, the last thing I wanted to do was walk away from one of the great honors of my life, being the Secretary of Homeland Security. But I did something wrong, and God punished me, I guess.
Going from the DHS to the White House, God punished the Chief of Staff. Trump allies in Washington describe a feeling of meltdown at the White House. They say the president wants to do something to turn the tide, but it's not exactly clear what that would be. That $31,000 dining room set ordered for HUD Secretary Ben Carson has been canceled. That request coming from the secretary himself, and the interior design firm that sold the set tells CNN they are waiving their restocking fee so taxpayers will not pay a dime. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders says the agency is looking for another option that is much more responsible with taxpayer dollars. Apologies for the chuckle there. Earlier this week, a HUD employee alleged she was demoted for refusing to spend more than legally allowed in order to redecorate Carson's office.
Drain the swamp with green velvet hickory chairs. No, 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 no.
They're getting it right.
No. 40 minutes past the hour. U.S. officials say they're skeptical about Vladimir Putin's claim to have a missile so powerful it can penetrate NATO defenses.
That I think our Department of Defense knew he was developing, all right? And some of them maybe, as he suggested, further along than others. But I don't think any of them, even if they were fully operational, changes the strategic equation, the strategic balance between us and the Russians.
That was former CIA and NSA Director General Michael Hayden. He and a lot of other intelligence experts actually skeptical about Vladimir Putin's claims of resurgent Russian military might. One U.S. official calling Putin's announcement cheesy, insisting U.S. defense and military capabilities remain second to none.
The Russian leader claiming his country has developed invincible nuclear weapon system with unlimited range. Mr. Putin's address featuring video clips of nuclear warheads hitting Florida, the site of President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate, mind you. Top U.S. officials unamused and unconvinced as well. Let's go live to Moscow and bring in CNN's Matthew Chance. Matthew, is this the equivalent of Putin on a horse with no shirt on?
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I mean, it's just another example of how Vladimir Putin likes to present himself as this macho kind of superhero defender of Russian interests. I mean, he was speaking first and foremost, I think, to a domestic political audience. I mean, he's got 16 days left before he faces re-election in this country. Now, there's no question that he's going to win that election hands down, but he loves taking every possible opportunity that he can to present himself as this, horseback riding, bare-chested leader who has the interests of the Russian military on his mind and is the man who can defend the national interest here in Russia. I mean, the election slogan that Putin has, actually, is strong president, strong country. And so that's the message he was trying to put across to the voters of Russia when he made that speech yesterday.
At least he kept his shirt on and wore a suit, though, so we can thank Mr. Putin for that. Matthew, appreciate it.
All right, it has been more than a week since 110 girls were abducted from their boarding school in Nigeria. Armed militants thought to be members of the terrorist group Boko Haram storming their building with weapons firing. Nigeria's president calling the incident a national disaster. This is a road we've been down before with Boko Haram. CNN's David McKenzie live from the scene of the kidnappings, speaking with some of the Nigerians who escaped capture here. And, we heard from the government right away that they would be diligent, that they would bring these kidnappers to justice and bring these girls home. But, the past is not very optimistic in terms of their ability to do so.
No, it isn't, Christine, and there's a real tragedy now in Nigeria more than 10 days after this horrific abduction. We went to that boarding school where 110 young girls and women ages 11 to 19, Christine, were taken from there by suspected ISIS-linked Boko Haram militants. They came into that school pretending to be Nigerian military. Some of the girls noticed that they had flip-flops on their feet, and so they ran, hiding in bushes, hiding in homes near that school. Many of them lost sisters, who were taken and they survived. Here's some voices of the survivors.
I haven't seen my sister since it happened. I tried to call her number and it didn't go through. In the morning, I looked for her at the school, but I just couldn't find her.
I worry that I have lost her for good.
We can imagine the fathers that we met, a small community group who talked to us, said that they want the world to care about their situation. And it's just, as you say, some 4 years after that horrific abduction of the Chibok girls that caught the world's imagination, 100 of those girls still missing. I just got off the phone with a Nigerian military spokesman. He says they are turning all stones. They're trying to find these girls. We've seen military jets overhead today. No indication yet whether the U.S. military, which has a significant presence here and particularly next door in Niger, is using their intelligence capability to help find and get these girls back home safe. Christine?
Remember, hashtag bring back our girls. It's just so sad. All right, keep us up to speed. Keep us posted on any developments there. Thanks, David. All right, another big corporate move following the footsteps of Walmart and Dick's. Kroger, the nation's